We are back on Inside Politics. Our guest today, Larry Woods, Democratic analyst, and Debra Maggart, a Republican analyst. We're talking about Super Tuesday coming up on Tuesday of next week, this coming week, which Tennessee will be participating in. But then we're going to start with a cloud on the horizon for both the world and national economy, and also for the presidential race, I think, and all the races, and that's the spread of the coronavirus. CDC says it's only a question of when, not if, that virus will strike here in this country. The president says we've got it under control. It's not going to be a problem. He has put the vice president in charge of our efforts. For a president who has put his mark on and his re-election on the stock market has stumbled all the way down into the basement. It continued to lose big losses this week, as big a losses as we've seen since 2008, and the biggest single-day loss in terms of points on Thursday of this week. Is this a real problem for the president?
Well, I think that the president is in a situation where he can't go overboard either way. I mean, no matter who the president is, you want the leader of your country to put out a good face, right? That things are under control, no matter what it is.
So why put the vice president in control?
Well, I think that it's delightful to put the vice president in control because he's a very qualified individual. I think that
and he might not tweet something that'll get him in trouble.
I think that was a good move on the president's part to give that to a former governor to. But
he had some problems in Indiana.
You're good. When I'm in trouble, I'll hire you to be my press media
But Mike
person.
Pence had some problems in Indiana with the HIV outbreak there when he was governor.
But you have to remember too, he can't control the behavior of people who unfortunately have that disease. I mean, there were a lot of things that happened there.
But Larry, don't the Democrats have to be careful that they don't look like they're rooting for this virus to come on and get a big problem?
And they do that way.
No one's rooting for it, not Trump, not the Democrats. You know, we've had 2 months warning time on this virus. Viruses do happen. That's no one's fault. He needs to be using the CDC now, whether it's Pence or Trump. He needs to be at the CDC headquarters every day trying to get funding, support, and help for what the CDC says we need to do.
But he did a great job putting those people that are the authorities, that he had them all up there with him, and he talked a lot. He talked a great deal. He answered lots of questions. It was a very long press conference. I know that some of the people said, oh, he's hiding something. Well, if you're hiding something, you don't stand up there like that with this super long press conference with all the authorities with you.
The president seems to be in disagreement with some of his CDC experts, and not unlike what you saw with the national security issues that came up about being involved with who is tampering with elections.
Trump sees the virus as a Democratic fake news. I mean, that's the way he sees the world.
Well, Mick Mulvaney has said that this is the latest hoax by the media. They've gone from impeachment and now they're on this.
But normally, it's just an outrage for him to be saying
usually the president, Trump, if you can say whatever you want about him, but he tries to be an optimistic person. He always says, that's great, you're wonderful, whatever. I think he's trying to put a good foot forward that, I mean, this is America after all. We can control this. We can do it better than anybody. I mean, he's always putting, you know, a good positive spin, and people like that.
What about this meddling in the election? We've had these stories come out of Washington in the last week or so that there appears to be new evidence that the Russians are meddling in the affairs again to try to help Donald Trump get reelected.
And Bernie.
And elect Bernie Sanders. Larry, one thing I've noticed about that, not a lot of details about exactly what the Russians are doing. Doesn't that sort of feed the narrative that this is a hoax or some kind of made-up story?
Our history tells us the Russians are going to do everything they can, A, to make us look bad, B, to weaken us, C, to make things chaotic, because they view that as helping them. And so it's nothing new for them to be meddling in an election. What's new is with the internet and high tech these days, they've got such great opportunities to succeed at the meddling, and that's very, very tragic for all of us, for both parties. I tend to think that the real problem is everyday people, us included, are going to lose faith in the legitimacy of our election counts. And I'm not talking about Florida 15 years ago, what I'm talking about next time and the next time and the next time, as more stories stack up that the Russians are determining what the count is. gee, why should I agree that he's the governor or she's the senator when the Russians obviously manipulated the vote count? We've got to do something about this. It strikes at the heart of our democracy.
But we know in the last election, no voting machine was tampered with.
Oh,
not
that's
a single
not true.
One. No, it is true. No, wait a minute.
That is such such malarkey.
No voting machine in this country was tampered with.
Voter files were tampered with.
Voter files were tampered with, and that's a different thing. When you go and vote, your vote was cast properly.
That has a direct impact on the accuracy of the voting machine.
But they fixed all this.
It's a one-to-one relationship.
And it only happened in
You got thousands of local election commissions.
No, hang on a minute. I represent a voting machine manufacturer. I know about this.
They claim it's all fixed.
No. Let me tell you, they've gone to great lengths to make sure that these things are safe. And let me tell you, where that happened with the voting files, it was in Chicago. Imagine that. In Chicago, the voting
listen to what your client's
files are messed up.
Google and Facebook and Amazon can't stop hackers, but we, the local voting machine manufacturer, can.
Well, they're not hooked up.
They're lying.
They're not hooked up to the internet. The voting machines are not hooked up to the internet. You can't hack it unless it's hooked up to the internet.
Then how come all these elections send vote totals in by email?
What do you mean?
Most local election commissions forward their vote totals by email. Yeah, the machine's not hooked up to the election, but they're using emails. That's the internet.
Mine doesn't do that.
Let me take the conversation to another area that I think people get more and more confused about, and that's polling. The national polls, a lot of them seem to indicate that almost any of the Democrats that are in the race might beat President Trump nationally. But Larry, we don't elect presidents by popular vote. We've learned that in the last several elections. Are these national polls unreliable because we don't know how they're mixed in terms of large states versus that tend to be blue versus smaller states that tend to be red?
They're totally unreliable. I love some of them. I'm sure Debra loves some of them. We can all take our choice which ones we want to talk about. A, we're too far from the election for a poll to really mean anything. And B, as you were just pointing out, because the different databases or groups involved, they're not that accurate. The polls get accurate, what, 3 days out before the election, a week out before the election.
Is it close?
That's when legitimate polls are worth paying attention to. And even then, I mean, look, what, 90% of the polls got it wrong on Trump and Clinton, or something approaching that number. The polls are a snapshot in time, and once we're past the time the poll was taken, things change. Look at the stock market and the virus. I bet polling was very different a month ago than it is now because of the stock market.
And now people don't use a landline phone like they did. Right. So the polling data is affected by that.
We're talking presidential politics 2020. We're also talking about Tennessee voting in the Super Tuesday elections coming up next week. Back to continue our conversation after this break.